So, welcome back to my reviews of the James Bond series. So, we have reached the 1990s now, so the fourth decade of 007, and we were about to be introduced to the next Bond. Now, as I mentioned in the Timothy Dalton film reviews, back in 1986, Pierce Brosnan was set to be the fourth James Bond actor, but due to his commitment to Remington Steele, the TV show that he was working on in the 80s, that fell out of his grasp. So he continued with his TV career and his film career, and then in 1994, the summer of 1994, he was announced as the next James Bond. They held a press conference, pre-production press conference, and Pierce Brosnan introduced the main stars of the film. Now, of course, the last James Bond film was in 1989, around the time of the Berlin Wall coming down, and Cold War period as well, the late 80s, early 90s. So it was the biggest gap between Bond film releases, 1989 to 1995, a 6-year gap. In fact, it was a 6.5-year gap, because Licence to Kill was released in the summer of 89, and Goldeneye had a November release in 1995, the film for Christmas, and it was indeed. It was critically acclaimed when it was released in 1995. It's one of the biggest film releases of the year. So the director this time, John Glenn, has now finished with the series as director. He directed the last 3 Roger Moore films and Timothy Dalton's 2 films. He has directed the most films from one director in the James Bond series, but it was time for John Glenn and a number of the series stalwarts to bow out of the series in the 90s. So Martin Campbell, director of a number of films, including the late 90s film The Mask of Zorro, which the less we say about the better, really, and of course the director of Daniel Craig's debut as Bond, Casino Royale, in 2006. But Martin Campbell's first foray into the Bondiverse was in 1995 or 1994, but 1995 was his first Bond film. He directed Pierce Brosnan's debut in Goldeneye. So if we go right back to the beginning, it's no longer Maurice Binder with his gun barrel tradition and his opening credits. It's down to contemporary artist Daniel Kleinman to present us with a revitalised version of the gun barrel. It looks sleeker. It looks more fit for the 1990s, for a new decade, for a new James Bond. So it's given a fresh new look, and Pierce Brosnan's gun barrel pose is actually one of the best of all of the Bonds. He actually looks like a man in charge. He looks, it's particularly effective, and he looks very authoritative as well when he's standing and just pointing the gun down the gun barrel to the audience. The pre-title sequence is the longest to this point in the series. It's about 10 minutes long, and it introduces Pierce Brosnan very well as James Bond. You see him kind of going around in the shadows, lurking in the shadows, and I mean, Pierce Brosnan is the James Bond that I grew up with. I remember his The World Is Not Enough was the first of the James Bond films that I went to see at the cinema. I'm quite a newer James Bond fan, but I've loved the film since 1999 when I saw my first James Bond film on the television. I went right back to the beginning and saw Dr. No. But the first of the Bond films that I actually saw in the cinema was Pierce Brosnan's third outing, The World Is Not Enough. So I was aware of Bond by the time I saw it at the cinema, and I just remember sort of coming out of the cinema, sort of going round corners, going like this, pretending I had a gun, and luckily I wasn't arrested or anything because I was only 12 years old at the time. But yeah, back to Goldeneye anyway. It's a great pre-title sequence. It's very explosive. We get a nice introduction to Bond. There are some great stunts actually in the opening sequence as well. Bond, supposedly Pierce Brosnan, obviously not, bungee jumping down a dam to break into a nuclear weapons facility in Russia. And we are introduced to 006 as well. It's the first time that you see 2 00 agents working together in the Bond series, which is quite a nice little motif for this for this comeback for Bond. So there's a good relationship between Pierce Brosnan and Sean Bean. They look like two secret agents working together. So, you know, the producers have achieved what they wanted to achieve. So lots of explosive action, lots of breathtaking stunt sequences. We have the bungee jump down into the dam. We also have Bond free-falling to catch up with the falling plane as well, where Oromov and his men are chasing Bond out of the facility. It's they are great sequences, actually, and the whole pre-credit sequence together works particularly well. It sets up Bond explosively, and of course we enter into Daniel Kleinman's world of the opening credits and Tina Turner's brilliant Goldeneye, actually, which was written by Bono and The Edge from U2. It's a great song, and it just works brilliantly for the film. And the opening credits are one of the best in the series, actually. Daniel Kleinman did a terrific job taking over from Maurice Binder. It's an inspired opening credits sequence with based on the Janus god with two heads, the two-sided god Janus, who basically is Sean Bean's character later in the film. But we leave Bond in the pre-credits at the end of the pre-credits sequence feeling guilty for the supposed death of 006 Sean Bean at the hands of General Oromov, played terrifically by Gottfried John. And the fireball opens onto the credits. So after the credits, we have the return of the Aston Martin. In a chase with Bond and Onatop, we have Famke Janssen playing, American actress playing Onatop, the femme fatale, who is probably one of the best femme fatales in the series since Fiona Volpe in Thunderball. She is terrific, really good. Over the top in places, but that suits the character down to the ground. It's very much actually a feminist film. We have lots of strong female characters. Isabella Scorupco, beautiful Isabella, plays Natalia Simonova. Who is obviously becomes Bond's lover in the film. There's very sensuous scenes with the two of them. So yeah, again, a very good Bond girl. We have Famke Janssen obviously playing Xenia Onatop, who is a great femme fatale, one of the most interesting and enigmatic Bond women in the series. And of course we have Judi Dench playing M now. Robert Brown is no longer M. We have a new M for the 90s, which of course is down to the fact that Stella Rimington became the real-life governmental head of MI5. So Judi Dench is the new head of MI6. She is the new M. And there's a fantastic dialogue between herself and Bond, where Bond is briefed in her office on his mission. She calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War. Some brilliant writing from Bruce Firestein for Goldeneye. Really, really top-notch writing. Going back to the scene after the credits, it actually says, if you notice, 9 years later at the bottom, and it's got me thinking recently, is this a sly reference, because obviously the GoldenEye was released in 1995, is this a sly reference that the pre-title sequence is actually meant to go back to 1986? If it is, then that's quite a cute reference to the fact that James Bond... that Pierce Brosnan was to be James Bond in 1986, but it was taken away from him. So it's kind of a mission in between Roger Moore's last outing as Bond in 1985's A View to a Kill and Timothy Dalton's first outing as Bond in The Living Daylights in 1987. So that's a nice little reference. Whether there's any actual meaning in that, I don't know. But that's just something that I thought of recently. It's quite interesting to think of. So as I said, GoldenEye seems to be a very feminist film. We also have Samantha Bond playing Moneypenny. Nice flirtation this time between Moneypenny and Bond. Not at all like Caroline Bliss and Timothy Dalton in the Timothy Dalton Bonds, where there just seemed to be no chemistry at all, and if there was any chemistry, it was very forced. This time Samantha Bond has great screen presence. She is the perfect Moneypenny for Pierce Brosnan's 90s Bond, a very 21st century James Bond secretary for the female M. She works very, very well and looks very, very good on screen. So we say goodbye to a number of series stalwarts for Goldeneye, but it's refreshing that Desmond Llewellyn, long-serving actor in the James Bond series, returns as M, and there's one of the most light-hearted sequences in the film is where Bond is given his gadgets from Q in Q's laboratory in Goldeneye. It's there's great banter between Desmond Llewellyn and Pierce Brosnan in their roles, and yeah, it is one of the film's very few light-hearted sequences, because this is quite a it's quite a dark film. There's quite a lots of it's quite moody, quite macabre as a film, as a James Bond film. We all, of course, Sean Bean, as he later goes from ally to the villain of the film, he actually proves one of the most interesting adversaries for Bond. I never thought very much of Sean Bean's sort of character digression, perhaps, from ally to villain, but looking back, he actually poses quite a big threat to Bond, and the fact that he once was an ally of Bond makes it that much more interesting, I think. So the supporting cast are largely strong in this. We have Isabella Scorupco, as I've mentioned, who plays Natalia, the lead female of the picture. We have Robbie Coltrane portraying Valentin Sukovsky for the first time, who kind of becomes an ally to Bond, even though Bond gave him the limp. And we also have some weaker ones. We have Joe Don Baker returning to the Bond series after playing a villain in The Living Daylights. He now plays Wade, who is a CIA ally for Bond. He'll also return in Brosnan's next film, Tomorrow Never Dies. So he's Bond's contact in this, and there's a very kind of forced, humorous scene between Wade and Bond in the film, which kind of, I don't know, it feels very out of place in the middle of the film for some reason. I'm not quite sure why it's there, but there we go. And we have Alan Cumming as well, with one of the most shocking Russian accents that you've ever heard, playing computer hacker Boris Grishenko, who kind of serves the purpose of the character, but is largely pointless and played completely for laughs, completely. So there is a lot of substance to Goldeneye. The story is a very good one, but and it's regarded by almost all fans as Pierce Brosnan's best. I used to believe this. I definitely used to believe it, but part of me thinks that Pierce Brosnan seems a little inexperienced, even at the age he was, to play James Bond. He looks very thin, quite gaunt actually in places in Goldeneye, and the fact that he beefed up and looks a little fatter in the face actually serves him well for his follow-up film for Tomorrow Never Dies. I think actually he looks more like a secret agent in Tomorrow Never Dies than he does in Goldeneye. But I'm sure, cue the backlash, many will disagree with me about that one. And there are a number of OTT moments in Goldeneye, but and sometimes it seems overly violent for a Bond film. It's now newly rated a 15 for the uncut version of Goldeneye, and in some parts of the film it definitely warrants that certificate, in my opinion. It is one of the more violent of the James Bond films. So Goldeneye was an important film for revitalising the Bond character, and Martin Campbell was certainly a fine, very determined director to take Bond into the 1990s and to bring the character back, to resurrect him for fans on the screen. Martin Campbell, if you see the documentaries on the DVD, is a very strong director. He certainly states exactly how he feels. He uses a lot of strong language. He really gets the actors to work very hard for to give a good performance, which is fair enough, I suppose. Goldeneye stands up as a strong Bond film, and certainly even more so Casino Royale stands up as one of the better James Bond films as well. So he obviously knows what he's doing. The problem here, I think, is that although Pierce Brosnan does a terrific job in his debut as Bond, the film does lag in places. The pacing isn't brilliant. Towards the middle of the film, it does lag. And not only that, but French composer Eric Serra does nothing to excite fans with his music, with his score for the film. The score is very slapdash. It seems to be sort of all over the place. and we'd go back to more traditional music with David Arnold with the next few of the Pierce Brosnan films. But Eric Serra was an experimental choice for Bond. This was an experimental Bond. It was a chance to see if James Bond was needed back on the big screen, whether fans still appreciated Bond. And, you know, it was the most successful film since Moonraker. Goldeneye did hugely well at the box office in 1995. So there's lots of glamour. It's a very confident start for Brosnan, but it does actually fall short, despite many people's opinions of Goldeneye, from being one of the best James Bond films. It is in my top 10, but it's not in the top 5. Not in my top 5, in my opinion. I'm expecting a number of people to disagree, so tell me your thoughts, please. Head over to my Film Fanatic blog, and James Bond will return. Pierce Brosnan will return in his second James Bond film, the action-heavy Tomorrow Never Dies.